Hello, everybody. Welcome. Tesla is down 1.7% to $175 per share. PE ratio of 45. Overall markets. Dow Jones up 0.7%, Nasdaq up 1.3%, S&P 500 up 1%, and Russell 2000 up 1%. GME is down 25%, AMC down 25%. Lots of volatility in those couple of stocks. A lot of the meme stocks moved together with those two. Rivian also jumped and then came back down. This morning, we got the CPI data. Headline figure was 0.3%, slightly lower than expected of 0.4 and prior 0.4. Core CPI came in pretty much in line at 0.3%. So inflation is coming in pretty much in line, still pretty elevated, especially services. Inflation is still pretty elevated. I don't see this changing the Fed's direction much at this point. Let's look at the CME Fed Watch tool. In about 27 days, the next Fed meeting will go live. Expectations are for another pause, no rate action by the Fed. By the end of the year, the median expectation is for 2 rate cuts. So after today's data, the rate cut expectation going into was 1 to 2 cuts, and now it's 2 cuts. We also saw the 5-year Treasury yield and 10-year Treasury yields come down quite a bit. And that's the part of the curve that's important for all the loan rates. So as it relates to Tesla, these yields are down about 10 basis points. I believe rather than the CPI data, that's because of the retail sales data coming in much softer than expected, flat in April versus expected 0.4% increase and prior 0.6% increase. Retail sales ex auto was 0.2% in line with expected. So that means automotive sales were down more than expected in April. So that's a significant slowdown in April. I suspect the GDP now figures will start declining a little bit. Will start softening a little bit. Latest estimate was 3.8% as of today. So it was updated today versus prior 4.2% as of last week. So that's primarily due to retail sales data. Any questions, comments? Please request to speak. I'm going to hold the space to about 1 to 2 hours. And I'm going to start doing Patreon only 30 to 60 minute kind of recap just to make sure all the patrons get their questions answered. So that's going to follow the daily here. Uzi Obi, go ahead.
I've seen a lot on X. The coffee prices were removed from, I guess, inflation. I was curious if that's counted in this CPI or like how that would be calculated. Thank you.
I mean, unless you're like me, coffee prices don't really, make up much of your spending. So I think most people drink maybe 1 cup, except, I drink like 5 cups a day. So I don't think it's material to CPI reading. Kubas.
About the coffee, it's not exactly right. Like you said, they removed the small cups that are not selling anymore in USA. That's why they did that. And my question to you guys is, why do you expect a single, even one single cut before elections? What kind of measurements are you looking for? For me, only high, very high unemployment can push them to do it. Unemployment around 4.5. What do you think about it? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, they've already said a number of times that the real interest rates are restrictive territory, and as long as they're confident inflation is going to decline towards 2%, their target, they would start cutting. It doesn't have to get to 2%, or unemployment doesn't have to rise. They've kind of made these things clear. They don't want to push the economy to a recession if they can avoid it. So I don't really agree with their assumption there. Uziobi?
I sort of see what Kuvas is saying with the need. Like, I guess there's a dual mandate that um, requires low price stability and low unemployment as their goal. But I do see like increasing unemployment is probably the only thing that they can confidently start cutting rates on. I don't know, maybe it's an intuitive take, but there's something about I'd say like their need to I guess cultivate both sides of that, and I think price stability comes before unemployment. So
Just one more sentence. Never in the history, Fed cut the rates just because they want it. They always cut the rates because something is breaking. So far, I don't know where. Nobody knows where or what. So I really don't expect any cut rates before elections as far as something's gonna break. Never ever in the history of USA something like that happened. So
I
I
don't think
believe.
that's correct. Sorry, new speakers are required to ask questions. Do you have a question?
No, that will be all. Thank you.
Thank you. Lance Waller, it says, so much FST pin action soon. When we get this vote in favor of Elon, 2024 is going to be the summer of robots. All right. Michelle says 12.5 is for Cybertruck. Curious to see when people think 12.5 will come. Maybe we can make some coffee bets on 12.4, 12.5, not to drive coffee prices even higher. But Uziobi, go ahead.
I think the 2024 summer timeline for the boss inspired this question or this line of thought. And I'm thinking, how would, I guess, the Federal Reserve start calculating or start looking into the humanoid labor force in, let's say, like 2 or 3 years when it's actually a relevant economic um, factor?
Let's switch to FST. When do you think 12.4 is going to roll out? Elon, let's look at his post real quick. I believe he said this weekend it goes to internal release, right? He says 12.4 goes to internal release this weekend and limited external beta next week. So I guess the beta title is still there. Roughly 5x to 10x improvement in miles per intervention versus 12.3. So if that becomes true, according to Tesla FSD tracker, we're looking at about 300 miles to critical disengagement, but it's not really clear I mean, he doesn't specify safety critical disengagement. So let's pull up TeslaFSDTracker.com. And if I scroll down on this main page, I see city miles to critical disengagement, miles to critical disengagement, miles to disengagement is 26. So miles to disengagement, according to the tracker, for 12.3.6 was 26 miles. So maybe that will go to 100 to 200 is, I guess, what Elon's kind of indicating. But he says in his post 12.4. So, I mean, 12.4 could have multiple dot updates to roll out throughout the fleet over the next couple of months. Let's say maybe by the end of the Q2. This is kind of like my base assumption. Maybe by the end of Q2, throughout June, it rolls out. We need about Tesla for this conversation. Let me see if he's in here. I don't see him. Let me see if I can ping him. So if we get 12.4 dot updates throughout June, and I guess the ambitious target is going to be miles to disengagement rising from 26 currently for 12.3.6 to 100 to 200 miles. And then 12.5, he says it'll be out in late June. But, that's Elon time. So probably sometime in Q3. And then 12.5 itself is going to have some dot updates. So if that rolls out throughout, let's say by the end of September, he says we'll see another major improvement in miles per intervention, but he doesn't say specifically 5x to 10x or anything like that. So call it 2 to 3x. So if all goes well, maybe by the end of Q3, we'll see a few hundred miles to disengagement. I mean, that would be very material, obviously. But let's see what Omar has to say on this. That's kind of like my base case. I mean, I have an optimism bias, so let's call that by the end of the year. Omar, how are you?
Hey, doing good.
So let's dive right into FSD with you. What do you think of Elon's kind of replies to you, I believe, right? On 12.4 and 12.5.
Yeah, so it sounds like 12.4 is only going to be going to employees this weekend. So a little bit of a delay there, but if it goes out to employees this weekend, I'll consider that, an exciting step. This is a really big update with a lot of really exciting stuff in it. And then it sounds like it's going to start going to some of the early access testers maybe next week. So that's going to be really exciting to start getting our hands on it. Um, the claim that it's 5x to 10x farther miles per intervention is, frankly, kind of an unbelievable claim. Software is already doing really well for me. I recorded a couple of zero intervention drives this morning. So, I mean, what does 5x to 10x better than that even look like? So, it's supposed to be able to do reverse, actually smart sum in banish. We also got a timeline for highway going end to end. That's going to be in 12.5. And then we also got confirmation that the Cybertruck is going to be added in 12.5. So he says that should be shipping in late June, which realistically means July, August. So hopefully by the end of the summer, we've got FSD support on the Cybertruck as well. And, so just looking at some of Waymo's data, Waymo, according to their filings in California, they do about 75% of their driving with human drivers, and about 25% is driverless. which is actually kind of surprising. But if you look at their miles per intervention, it's about 80,000 miles per intervention on the driverless side, which is where, you know, when they an intervention in that case means someone had to go and get the car. So it doesn't count like remote interventions. And then for their human supervised test fleet, it's about 18,000 miles. So I think we're kind of around maybe 300 miles with the current intervention. With the current version, if we can get in the next version 5 to 10 times better, assuming that's real, and I imagine it's probably going to vary depending on where you are, whether you're 5x or 10x or maybe even 2x, or for some people it may be 20x, right? So obviously you can't just generalize and say it's this much better. There's many different areas, but if we can get 5 to 10 times better than that, 1,500 to 3,000 miles per disengagement, we're starting to get within spitting distance of really some robotaxi trials. And you really only need to 10x one more time to get to where Waymo is, start surpassing it from there. So I think it's really exciting. It was also interesting to hear Elon's commentary on the YIPIT data. I finally baited him into responding by saying, if he doesn't respond, then that means it's true. But if it's not true, then he'll, comment on it. And he said, well, I'm not going to comment on everything, but it's way higher than, or I think he said much more than 2%. So what is much more? Is 4% much more than 2%? I don't know. But I'm probably, thinking maybe around 10%, maybe 5 to 10%. 20 would be, probably the highest I could see it going. Um, but if they got to 20, they double the user base. If they get to 10, then they increase the user base by 50%. So I don't think it's necessarily about, um, just how many people have signed up right now, but really how many people continue to sign up when the new versions come out, try smart summon, things like that. I think we've planted the seeds in a lot of people's mind. They've tried it, and hopefully they'll want to try the new version too. A lot of people are still getting the trial now, but it does kind of beg the question, like, could we have gotten a higher conversion rate if we waited to send them the version that was 5 to 10 times better? But I think they kind of said we're planning to do three major updates during the trial period. Instead, we didn't really get any of those three major updates during the trial period. So it did take a little bit longer than they wanted, but a lot of people are still getting the trial now. So we'll see if it really lives up to the hype. I mean, 5 to 10 times further per intervention is a pretty bold claim. Um, that would really be getting into thousands of miles per intervention, which is pretty crazy to think about.
Well, he said per intervention. He didn't say per safety critical intervention. And according to Tesla FSD tracker, per intervention miles is 26. If we make the assumption that
Oh,
safety critical disengagements will also go down by 5x to 10x, then we can um, start from the 300 miles to safety critical disengagement to, I guess, 1,500 to 3,000. Then you're talking thousands.
yeah. I mean, I would expect safety critical interventions to really be, primarily what he's talking about, not somebody just, you know, thinking it's going too slow or something like that. So, FSD tracker, of course, is a very noisy data source. So I wouldn't assume he's just saying it's going from 20 to 200. I think he's really talking about a meaningfully further number of miles between safety critical interventions. And that's really all we care about, because if it's just about the car getting stuck at a dead end or something, but not in a way that's safety critical, you can have a remote operator or the owner of the car just send a command and tell the car what to do, as long as it's not doing anything safety critical.
Sounds good. Just a quick announcement. I plan to keep these daily spaces from now on to 1 to 2 hours. It's probably going to go to 2 hours. And then following that, I'm going to do Patreon only live streams for about 30 to 60 minutes to recap the day and just kind of ensure that all the questions and comments from patrons are heard, answered. And that's going to be on, I'm still kind of deciding on the medium, but Patreon makes it easy to do live streams now. So it's going to be complementary to this space. So this space will stay free and open to everybody because of my patrons. But because of their support, I also want to do something extra for them. And that's going to mean daily spaces for them as well for about half hour to 60 minutes. All right. Any questions, comments? Please request to speak. Omar, when do you think we're gonna get? I'm also guessing that he means 12.4 is 12.4, which is a minor release. Will have dot releases throughout the coming months, and eventually it'll get to 5 to 10x, and then 12.5 will come. 12.5 minor release will come with its series of dot updates, but we don't know what kind of an increase we're talking from 12.4 to 12.5. Stephen?
So I have a question on FSD and what I call a misrepresentation of a quote. And let me read the quote and then I'll tell you why it's being misrepresented.
Go ahead.
Musk wrote that only 1 out of every 10,000 miles of distance driven is actually useful for training the FSD neural network. People are saying, I'm hearing on X, that we're only having 1 intervention per 10,000 miles. So
That's not what he said.
Yeah, the thing is, like, there's so many opinions out there, and in here too, there's a lot of opinions. So when you say people are saying, who's saying it, and
I don't
why
want to
does it
name
matter
names, but
why does it matter what anybody, like one specific person says?
Because it's being broadcast to many people in spaces or throughout the community that it's incorrect.
Well, it's not being broadcast in this space, and I can't control other spaces. So if you want true information, that come to this space. If you want noise, go elsewhere. That's obviously not what Elon said. And as soon as he said it, I said in here that he probably just kind of means order of magnitude. Like he's not looking at some specific data that says 1 in 10,000 miles. That's obviously going to vary with, location, weather, traffic. So many factors play into it, and these are very nuanced things. And I wouldn't take like every single tweet and reply at face value. I think it's kind of good to have this overall understanding based on first principles thinking, the technology, historical experience, and that kind of as new data rolls in, adjust it a little bit. Obviously they're not going to go from 26 miles per intervention to 1 in 10,000 miles. Like, anyway. Omar, I see you made a profit on your $109 profit on your GameStop. How do you feel about that?
Well, some people have been calling me paper hands, but you know what they say, no one ever 8% when I got in, but I was like, yeah, what the hell? I'll get 5 shares. I sold them, so I got a free half share of Tesla.
Uziobi, go ahead.
I don't want to change the conversation too much, but I'm curious how many people in this, if you had a poll, how many people in this space have actually tried FSD? Because if you don't have a Tesla
Irrelevant. Data speaks for itself. Although I think people should use FSD because it does improve their experience. and safety. But whether you use FSD or not is irrelevant in your understanding of FSD. And we have the living proof of that in the speakable right now. Machine.
Well,
Machine has had the best set of predictions on FSD, and he doesn't have hardware 2.5. Okay.
Well, but let me backtrack 1 second here before you get into the FSD conversation. I wanted to ask: did Omar buy GameStop or was he short?
He bought and sold.
This guy is a loser, just a meme stock trader.
He made $100. That's better than your most of your trades.
Congratulations. My trade on GameStop is already better than that, and there was more. And that was by selling a call spreads when this thing was mooning, which is what a proper market participant should be doing to kind of even out the insanity. Okay, if there's one side that's stupid and insane, that's buying calls on this because some guy posted a picture of a roaring kitty, that this stock should go up 3x. So, be careful who you pay attention to for investing advice. That's all I have to say.
What do you think about 12.4, 12.5 replies?
Well, there's no doubt that it's in general bullish, just because of the sheer magnitude of changes that Musk is speaking of. And that is in general in line with my thinking in terms of the trajectory here, right? I've been saying that I think the biggest gains are going to be happening now in the next few versions. And then after that, I'm thinking maybe it tapers off, right? And where does it taper off to? That's the question. But still, when you hear the numbers he's throwing out, you can't help but be impressed by it. Saying a 5 to 10x improvement or reduction in interventions in from 12.3 to 12.4 is pretty insane. We got to be honest. My question then comes down to, what does he actually mean? Because he's not very specific. So is he talking about more comfort interventions, which I believe so. That's still useful. The other part is what's his base? What is he comparing it to? Is he comparing the improvements on highway to what they are on the current version, even though that version's not the version of V12 is not being used on the highway? So is it like really bad? And he's saying, wow, we got this big improvement, but it's compared to something we don't know about. So there's still some questions there, but ultimately still it's going to be.
No, I mean 12.4 isn't end-to-end on the highway either. So it's not that.
Yeah, you're right. That's between 12.5 and 12.4, I guess. So it's going to be, maybe it's mostly comfort, but either way, it's going to be a big deal. I don't know how else you can spin it.
So let me ask you this. How confident are you at 100% about our bet that 99%, at least 99% of rides will have zero disengagement, critical disengagement, for 1 month by the end of Q3?
Well, I feel better about it. I already felt good about it before, and I feel better about it today because going in, they're going to be on at least V12.5 at that time. And we don't know the breakdown between improvements on critical interventions versus comfort. But still, if he said a 5 to 10x improvement and then another significant improvement between .4 and .5, I'm estimating in aggregate, you're getting a 10 to 20x improvement. And let's say it's not a 10x improvement on critical disengagements. Maybe it's less, but maybe it's still a 5x, 3, 4, 5x improvement in critical disengagements. I believe statistically that probably could get us to move from this 96 something percent to a 99% for a month already. So I think I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, I need a probability estimate.
I'm going with 85%.
Okay, good.
What about you? What are your feelings in your current estimate?
Yeah, I'm glad we have a bet, and I think that we need more information.
Do you feel more
Lucky.
confident or less confident since yesterday?
Same confidence.
Such a cop-out answer.
No, it's not. It's a very informative answer if you know how to listen.
Yeah, I get it. We need more data. So you haven't changed anything because you apply no significant weighting to his comments yet because they're too vague.
Too vague, yeah, exactly. I'm surprised that you're feeling more confident, honestly. Go ahead. What are you raising your hand for?
Because I'm the only polite person on this space, as we've known historically. But unlike Omar, who just interrupts me left and right, and you, who've kicked off so many people who haven't come back, so we know really I'm the only one. But anyways, yeah, I feel good because I think obviously I was predicting it ahead of time, and I think his comments don't hurt. Although I do agree there's some vagueness there. I'm also confident because you're just on the wrong side of a lot of bets and non-bets, but just predictions, such as SMCI and NVIDIA, which I told you I bought SMCI a few weeks ago, and you were just disgusted with me.
Dude,
You're
hold on. You
disgusted.
said you and I actually have a bet on SMCI. You believe that it's going to go to an all-time high, and we made this bet about a month ago. Did you forget already?
I did forget, but yeah, I did bet that, and I still think that will happen. Although
But you sold your calls.
I sold
Yeah.
my calls. I
So
sold my NVIDIA
clearly,
calls.
you think it's going to go all-time highs since you sold your calls.
Well,
do you contradict yourself once an hour?
The thing is that my prediction doesn't mean I'm going to fully bet to that endpoint if I've already made a lot of money. Okay, I'm not trying to be greedy. So there's a run right now into NVIDIA's earnings, and my NVIDIA calls are up 40% from a month ago, and it was a lot of money. It was a pretty good percentage of my accounts. And so yeah, did I sell them now? For sure, because I'm happy with that. And
What
NVIDIA,
I found really also interesting is that you sold your NVIDIA calls before the earnings. So that shows your confidence level, I guess.
It's risk, just risk assessment. I don't know exactly what they're going to say in the earnings call. Why would I take a 40% gain and just kind of be like, whatever? Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens in the earnings call. I'm fine with it where it is. I have other investments to make in other areas, and I will pay attention to the earnings call. And if I view it as bullish, right, I'll still buy back in. And yeah, did I lose out on some gain? That's fine because I reduced risk. Meaning also, if the stock corrects itself in this time period right now, then I could buy back in again. So I'm just, I'm very Zen, Buddhist, yin and yang. Just take what's given to me.
Okay, thank you. Danny.
Hey guys,
Danny, first time speakers are required to ask questions. What's your question?
I clicked the button by accident, so I could go back to listener too.
Molly.
Hi guys, how are you today?
Sorry, different space.
What?
Yeah, last night's
happened?
space was chill mode. This is not chill mode. This is the opposite of chill mode. This is intense mode. aggressive, assertive mode. Okay. No asking hi, how are you? Get to your question, and let's move on.
Speaking of, that's the mode your mom chooses for me all the time. Assertive.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to make another bet since you're feeling more confident now?
Depends about what.
The bet is going to be about when are we going to see 1,000 miles per critical disengagement. So since he said 5 to 10x, and the current level of miles to critical disengagement is 300, so that would be 1,500 to 3,000. When are we going to see 1,000 miles per critical disengagement on TeslaFSDTracker.com?
You're saying, I don't know what it is currently. At some point, it was 300 miles per critical disengagement. And are you saying we just have to see it on that website at one point in time for that to win the bet? Or are you saying
No,
it has to be over some
for
certain period of time?
yeah, for a month.
I have to think about it. I have to look at the data. But you're saying, to be clear, you're asking when will we see 1,000 miles per critical disengagement or higher for a full month worth of data?
Correct.
I'd have to think about it some more. My general thinking is that would align with the same version of FSD 12.5 that I'm speaking of, which could be around the same time. Like
Wait,
September.
I thought you said 5 to 10x for 12.4.
That's overall interventions going down, which I believe some of them are comfort, or a lot of them could be comfort. So I don't necessarily think that critical disengagement is going to fully go down 5 to 10x in one version. That's not clear.
Okay. Bull 2035. You're already changing your words. This is like makes me remember somebody. Bull 2035.
Hey,
Thank you.
I recognize Tesla wants to have FSD for all circumstances, but one thing I'd like to know, and maybe Omar knows, and one thing I'm trying to keep track of, is there any type of government outreach by Tesla to make sure that, because I could see cities, signs, how roads are constructed, lines in the roads, things that would eliminate some of the edge cases. And that to me seems like where they should launch FSD first is with cities that are willing to work with Tesla to eliminate edge cases to make it a better experience. So I just don't know, is Tesla doing that type of government outreach?
Omar?
Well, you don't need to change the road, you need to make the software work. Okay. As these things get out there, more and more cities probably will make their roads easier for the computer to read. But you can't change all the world's roads. You need to make the software work on any road, even a road that's challenging.
Uh, And Omar, I get that a lot. The thing that this is to me, it's about stringing together victories, and getting this out. This is a new product. It freaks some people out, and I just wonder if we could have some early victories with cities that are willing to partner with Tesla to say, look how great this is, the benefits, and then from there it becomes a proof of concept. Because we all love this technology, but 95% of people out there, they gotta figure out a way to get on the ship, and I think that would be one way to help that happen. But I appreciate everybody's thoughts. Thank you.
What matters is 5 to 10x less interventions per mile. We don't need victories along the way. We don't need people to feel good. It doesn't matter what people think. Everybody is an idiot. Almost every statement I hear about this technology is like wrong or misguided. So, I mean, you could do something like that, but it would just be a waste of time. You're talking about construction projects. It would be years to even get them to start doing these construction projects. it'd be faster to just make the software better. So the key is reducing miles per intervention. Everything else is a distraction.
Uziobi.
I agree with what Mars was saying about the technology coming first, but then to add to Bull's point, the exposure effect does matter. And the more, it's going back to my point about how many people have tried FSD. I don't have a car. So the more people, not have a car, I don't have a Tesla. So the more people that have the exposure to the technology, even if it's in an Uber, not necessarily partnering with governments, I find that to be valuable. But it doesn't mean Tesla has to spend money on that.
Danny.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you guys think there will be a good use for LLM in the car, but maybe not inferred in the car, but like it can take its time to do an API call and really try to figure out what the car should do after? Like, could it prevent some interventions?
No, you need the delay would be huge in terms of you need real time. Yeah, that wouldn't work. I think LLMs, like kind of like how you talk to Grok or ChatGPT or whatever.
No, I mean,
Similar to how.
I don't mean to use it for real time. I mean, like, let's say it's stuck in I don't know, it could be stuck somewhere, and then it can ask like, why is it like there might be scenarios where it's worth like you can take the time. I wonder if you guys experience.
Machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is. For example, I think there's situations with traffic and routing, which the classic navigation isn't working well. And I think if there was more context on what's happening, taken in with an LLM could help give you advice for how to get out of the situation or reroute. So something like that where it's not necessarily real time need. So I think that's one example I can think on the top of my head.
Omar.
I mean, I think an LLM in a traditional sense is, like Yaman said, probably too high latency to be used in any control decisions. But it does seem like we're really moving to a world where FSD and these sort of omni models are sort of merging together. You look at, for example, the Grok 1.5 Vision website, and they show some of the examples there. It does seem like these language models or these omni models that these companies are putting out in FSD are actually going to look probably fairly similar architecturally in the future. Just that FSD is optimized for lower latency. So I think having a lot of background knowledge of the world is super helpful, as the Grok 1.5 Vision examples show. And they are working on a voice assistant right now. So that's kind of the first application of an LLM in the car, just a voice assistant. But over time, I could see it actually being integrated directly into the FSD more directly, especially as processing power increases.
Thank you. Stingray. Stingray.
Hello. Sorry, I've never done this before.
Okay, what's your question?
So my question is, with all these advancements in FSD, at what point does Tesla raise the price on full self-driving and/or the cars?
Machine.
When it's robotaxi level.
And according to Machine, that's going to happen tomorrow.
Fake news.
All right.
You're just like your dictator and Erdogan. He's making stuff up left and right.
Yeah, I'm not even following, so I can't comment on that. DB says improvements happening fast with FSD V12. We need a Dojo supercomputer day. We haven't heard what's the latest on where Dojo stands, Omar?
Well, it definitely seems like there's some major changes being made to Dojo. We have heard TSMC mention a little bit about Dojo and how it's in mass production now. They're using their system on a wafer architecture. It's pretty innovative, actually, where you have a bunch of different SoCs on the same wafer and they just put them all together. Should be much more energy efficient. I think Pete Bannon is on the team now. So I think Dojo's in production. It's being used for training, but the vast majority of their training is still being done on the NVIDIA architecture with the H100s and the H200s they're buying. So the next kind of meaningful announcement I'd love to see for them is how much of their training's being done on Dojo versus the NVIDIA cluster.
Machine, is your understanding of timeline of how fast FSD will improve depend on Dojo at all? Or are you GPU agnostic?
I think it's dependent on overall compute needs, and I don't think necessarily we need Dojo, and I'm not even sure exactly how much additional compute we need right now, like the rest of this year. It seems like with the compute they have, they're training these models, these versions, ahead of time, and I don't know. They're already got V12.4, 12.5, 12.6 have been trained to some level. So, they're going through testing and all that, which takes months. So it doesn't seem like their turnaround time is very slow here for training these models. So it I'm not sure. Like, of course, additional compute will help make things go faster, but I don't know if it's a limiting factor right at this moment.
I mean, whether they can get Dojo up or NVIDIA up, it's all really the same. But if Dojo can help them do it and use less energy, use less money to build, use less money per unit of training compute, then that helps them. So, I think it would be material if they said, for example, hey, Dojo's up and running. We're building these two new Dojo data centers in Austin and Buffalo. And we're actually seeing, for example, a 50% lower cost on our Dojo infrastructure compared to NVIDIA or something like that. That could obviously be material because, I mean, the solution is now not really about engineers as much. It's just about throwing massive amounts of compute and data at the problem. So anything that lowers their costs, their energy efficiency, it's going to help them ultimately train models faster. But yeah, we don't really know. I mean, some of the details of how well Dojo is working. Why is it that they're still doing most of their training on NVIDIA? I assume it's just because the scale of the NVIDIA infrastructure is far greater. Maybe there's still some issues with Dojo. I'm not really sure. But they've been pretty quiet about it. I would imagine that, maybe the next AI day, if they have one, or maybe the Robotaxi event, they might give us some more details. But I'm really looking for them to say, hey, actually, the majority of our training is now done on Dojo. And I'm not sure how far away we are from that. Maybe 4 quarters or more, even. I'm not sure.
No hands mode. No hands mode.
Yeah, so I we had some news from Nvidia yesterday. I didn't get the actual source of it and everything, but it was from a reputed source. So it had Nvidia commentary that Tesla already is buying the B200 chips as well, the Blackwell architecture. And TSMC had said that Dojo's increase in compute power would be 40x over 3 years. So by 2027, it will 40x the current rate.
Can you repeat the sentence about 40x, please?
Yeah, so TSMC said that they will 40x their Tesla compute power on Dojo over the next 3 years, so by 2027. So that would be like, opening up two new data centers from Buffalo and Austin. So that can be anticipated that.
So just to repeat what you said, TSMC will ramp Dojo production in next 3 years. Is that right?
Yeah, so with
No, I don't think
TSM,
that's
Omar,
true.
can
you know,
you, what is the claim here?
I think that TSMC made some commentary while they're talking about their new 2 nanometer process node, the A16W, and that's supposed to come into production in 2026. But I think they were just, they made some comments about Tesla on the call, but it's not necessarily related to that new process node. I mean, Tesla may be building stuff on that eventually, but I believe they're using TSMC 5 nanometer or something like that right now for Dojo.
yeah, no, they're using 7 nanometers right now. But I'm just reading it out from the commentary that I was able to find, and it's saying that a production for Tesla's next generation Dojo supercomputer training chips, heralding a significant leap in computing power by 2027 by 40x. So I don't really, they haven't given additional context or anything. It's just a simple sentence from them.
Thank you. Is this from their earnings transcript?
No, I'm trying to find the original source. It is from an article on TechCrunch.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. And because that's new and it is material information if it's true. That's why I want to get the wording correct. And I think what might be really helpful for communication is if you kind of put these in a post in a detailed, with sources included before you request to speak, and that we can pin it up here as you kind of present it. I think that would really help communication. Thank you. Jacob.
Yeah, I was wondering if anyone had thoughts on how the models would be structured. Let's say, like, the first day that FSD is running in both the United States and China, the first day that that's true, will there be two separate models, or do you think that will already be constructed in one model that just knows it's in different geographies?
One model.
Machine.
It's going to be derived from one model, but I believe the Chinese model will be fine-tuned on Chinese data that cannot be exported outside of China. So you can't train a model in the US with Chinese data. So either Tesla moves their entire compute to China, where I presume they'll be able to pull in all of their data and train it there and have one global model, or they train an initial model in the US and then send it to China and fine tune it for China.
Thank you. We have both Sawyer and Telescope and Omar, all the kind of big people, and then also, the small ones like Machine on the board, the unimportant. But before we go to Sawyer, I want to read what Dee Patel said on live chat. She says, the adoption of FSD is dependent on genuine understanding of the innovation and the freedom it brings to the natural flow of life. The dinosaurs will form the wreckage of the past. I agree with this. I think the more people understand how FSD works, the more comfortable they become with the decisions the software makes. I don't know if that's possible for FSD to kind of become this kind of mass knowledge kind of thing, but I think these spaces are helping. Omar?
Yeah, just quickly on Machine's point, I don't think that they're going to train a base model and then fine tune it based on Chinese data. I think that what the data security approval allows in principle is for them to actually train in the US. And I believe that Chinese leaders are on board with this. As we've discussed in this space, the data is actually anonymized at the car where faces and license plates are blurred out. I think that China understands, look, if we want this technology brought to China, we have to allow them to do some training. And I think what we've seen is actually that the base model is extremely versatile to working anywhere in the world. We saw it driving in Germany with roundabouts. We hear that there's people testing it in China. And we saw someone in Moldova who imported a car from the United States and it was able to work with minimum modification. So I think the base model is extremely strong. China obviously has a lot of unique situations that probably need some additional training data. But I think probably just, improving the training set somewhat, adding some Chinese cases would probably be beneficial. And I would expect it would not only make the model perform better in China, but probably make it perform better in the US and Europe too.
Okay, before Sawyer, Telescope, welcome back. It's been a while. Why did you leave? Why'd you come back? Everything okay?
Uh, Still probably can't comment on everything. I miss everyone. I miss being more active. Hoping that will change in the future. Nothing bad. Life goes on. But I wanted to take a second to comment on the kind of the Tesla, the model being trained in China, as well as the kind of the universal model. Omar spoke to a majority of the points that I wanted to bring up. One thing in particular was that through those security clearances, uh, Tesla basically did have to agree and confirm that the majority, if not all, data that is coming from Chinese vehicles, particularly even if it is anonymized, must remain in China to some extent, at least prior to any clearance and approval. And there was a expansion to one of their local data centers last year, around August to September, potentially in preparation for that, because that has been a kind of long-term progress, especially notably because there were some issues with the vehicles being able to enter and like airports and so forth prior. But I think that I would kind of blend between what Machine and what Omar said. Is I expect that Tesla already has this very robust model that they can apply practically anywhere around the world. And they've been using that model in particular because FSD training has been happening, in a lot of different European countries as well. And they've been using that kind of unified model, especially in
Good.
regions where they don't have a data center for that area.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for coming back. And I hope that you frequent more often. I pinned at the top of your screens a quick announcement. We're going to hold these spaces daily again, free and open for all because of my patrons. Patrons they support the space and they allow this space to stay free and open for everybody. On time, every day, we cover all the news. We dig into all the technology. So in order to pay back to patrons, especially value patrons, I'm going to host 30 to 60-minute live streams for Patreon only following these spaces from now on. Kind of make sure that they have all their answers, questions answered, thoughts heard, and that announces at the top of your screens. And the link to Patreon is also at the top of your screens. So you're welcome. How are you?
Good. What's going on, everyone?
Nothing much. Are you just kind of swinging by, or did you have an announcement to make?
No announcement. What's the topic of the day for you guys?
Well, we're talking about 12.4.5. But if you want to change the subject, that's fine. If you don't, we can go to Pennington.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Elon means by 5, if it's actually 5 to 10 x improvement in terms of miles per intervention. One thing I wanted to note, I don't know if you guys already talked about this, but Peril Jane, who works at or used to work at Tesla as head of planning at AI, he said Fred from Electric sort of claimed that Tesla's losing more AI leads and things are going bad. But Peril said before he left Tesla, he had a great chat with Elon, and he said he would have stuck around longer if he didn't have the itch to go chase his specific vision. And I understand that if you have like a chance to go start your own company, be a co-founder, and get 150 million in like funding from some of the biggest names in Silicon Valley, I mean, why would you not go do that? And it's likely could just be that his stock options were sort of vested at this point. And he did note that at the end, Peril said, quote, "Don't see any capacity eroding on his front, Elon's front, like the article mentions." So there you go.
Thank you. Pennington. Before that, sorry, Pennington, before that, Machine, go ahead, let's get your response.
I just wanted to say we talked about most of that yesterday, Stoyer. If you were here, you would have known that, but you weren't here.
I'll be better, Machine.
Pennington.
Sometimes this space is like my guide as to how things are progressing, and what I read is kind of what I think. So when I see a post, I think it was by like Omar a couple days ago, and he says something to the extent of around 5% of drives on V11 were without an intervention, and now it's up to 75%. And I said to myself, well, that seemed low. That 5% seemed low relative to what I was seeing, to what I was reading on this post. So then I'm fast forwarding to today, and I'm thinking, well, if FSD is accelerating this fast, and we are perhaps this close, wouldn't institutions be using the software? Wouldn't they be investigating what Tesla has? Wouldn't they be buying if they thought it was real? So I'm just trying to figure out what's missing in this picture. But something just seems somewhat amiss between what I'm seeing and actually what's happening. So I'm just curious how you.
Well, you're assuming that they're not testing it. You have no evidence to support that.
I personally know a few Wall Street analysts that do actually test regularly Tesla's supervised, version. They test version 12.3, 3.6, all kinds of versions, and so we should give them some credit. There's some art like Adam Jonas, Pierre from New Street, I think, a couple others. I think Dan Ives also does as well. But institutional investors in general tend to not just go off of that. They tend to just go off like, is this making the company any money? And they'll make an investment decision and forecast based off that. And they typically don't. That's why they didn't include Tesla Energy for the longest time, and certainly aren't going to include Tesla Bot for a very long time because of that.
Yeah, and then I would add to that, I actually used to interview investment managers, specifically institutional investment managers. And, the most successful ones, from my experience, and the data, the data sample size is not very large. Okay, I interviewed maybe dozens of them. The most successful ones stayed away from management. They put a distance between themselves and the management and the product. And kind of like what Machine does, they focused on what the data shows instead.
Yeah, I understand putting a wedge between yourself and like Tesla management. I don't understand not testing the product yourself like Gordon Johnson does and giving your own opinions about it. Like at least not testing it once in a while, because then you have the best view of it.
I don't think so. I disagree respectfully.
So you would just go off numbers then?
I think the numbers speak for themselves, and I like to test FSD just for fun. But whether I test FSD, whether I own Tesla, doesn't change fleet-wide miles to intervention.
Would you not agree that trying FSD supervised in person is a much different experience than watching a video of it online, though?
Well, even if you didn't watch a video of it online, if you just looked at Tesla FSD tracker, that would be enough.
I don't know.
I don't think these institutional investors are going on YouTube and watching Chuck Cook videos.
I don't think you need to watch a Chuck Cook video, but actually using it, understanding what's in front of you, helps you understand what the product really is, right? I mean, you can look at data online, but it doesn't really capture how useful is this? What are the actual issues? It doesn't capture the feeling of being frightened because of an intervention, because of a near miss, right? So you can get a lot from data, but ultimately, if you're reviewing Apple, you should probably try an iPhone.
Yeah. I mean, I still look, when I drive a Tesla, I always use FSD. 99% of my miles are on FSD. When I take it off of it, for whatever reason, I feel unsafe, comparatively speaking. Okay. So I do think that people should buy Teslas and use FSD for all of their miles, but that's for a separate reason. The question Sawyer was asking was, from an investment decision perspective, what I've observed is that data speaks for itself for some of the biggest institutional investors. But Machine, Pennington, and then Nick.
Yeah, I think first we really need to separate these products into the two options. One is FSD as an L2, L3, whatever assist versus robotaxi level software. The former is something that I agree that you maybe do need to experience and really understand the value and how much it's improving, and to experience and understand if you actually want to buy it. I do think from an investing standpoint that product, the benefits to Tesla aren't like, it's going to be positive. It's going to help gross margins a bit, but it's not earth shattering. And I don't really spend much time on it anymore as I did a few years ago. However, the latter product, robotaxis, that software, I don't think you need to experience it. I think you need to look at the data to understand when we're even getting close. I don't think institutional investors are going to be massively speculating ahead of time until the data shows that they're getting closer. And if you're someone who needs to get all the gains possible, then you just buy and hold now and wait, I suppose. And if you want to wait, and I would rely on the data, I think you can still find a good opportunity to buy and get ahead of the market.
Pennington.
But when certain amazing products come out, it could be the iPhone, it could be ChatGPT, it could be Amazon shipping. People touch it, people explore it, people get fascinated, and they say, you know what? It may not produce a lot of money right now, but I'm going to pay up for this. I'm going to pay for these future cash flows today. So, sort of what I'm driving at is, what do you think they're experiencing right now, either looking through the data or actually experiencing the actual product, where they're unwilling to purchase Tesla stock, thinking, well, the PE let's may be very high, but I'm willing to drive up Tesla stock and elevate its PE for future cash flows, because I'm so confident this thing is going to just be a groundbreaking technology. But they're clearly not doing that now. And yes, I understand it's a $550 billion car company, but it's certainly not the same as how they were treating Tesla a few years ago relative to just robotaxi, not even
Well, a few years ago, the goal was to have 1 million robotaxis in 2020, and 4680 production was going to reach 100 gigawatt hours in 2022. Okay. So things have changed. Interest rates have risen 5%. A lot of things have changed. I mean, like, is this news to you that stocks have ups and downs? Machine?
Yeah, it's interesting because even just today, I was trying to think about Tesla valuation, and it's really like a dumbbell, where I really think the valuation's either maybe a bit lower than here if you exclude Robotaxi, Optimus, or much higher than here. And it's this weird probability distribution where there's like peaks on two different sides. And that's what makes it a bit complicated for investors to understand to buy, especially institutional investors. So I just expect a lot of volatility coming up until we get more clarity on the progress of FSD.
Henning.
Yeah, I think I would agree that you need to separate those two. So FSD, I think for personal driving, I think it's a unique selling point for Tesla. And I think that will stay for long years because no other manufacturer is getting any close to having FSD. That's one. And two, I think that once institutionals see EPS coming from a robotaxi network, then they will invest clearly. And if that becomes clear after August, I think that this will massively change the sentiment.
Nick.
I wanted to bring up something Omar mentioned earlier and then just recently. I know earlier in the conversation, Omar, you mentioned that stringing together some smaller wins, even if it's at the city level, doesn't matter. It's all about making the software work and reducing critical interventions. But then recently you just said that the data won't solely determine how people feel. They need to experience full self-driving and trust it. So, those two thought processes are a bit conflicting. And I do happen to believe and agree with the last statement. People need to try this and trust it. The numbers really don't matter unless you get people to trust this stuff. So, um, I'm wondering if Tesla is going to try to do something on a smaller level to get consumer sentiment more trustworthy behind this. Since, like you said, watching a video on YouTube doesn't really give you the experience. Sitting behind the seat does. Thanks.
What exactly is the conflict here, or what's the contradiction?
Earlier you mentioned that the data matters, of just the number of critical interventions. It's really not about stringing together wins for consumer sentiment. When someone mentioned about working with cities to make sure that the lines or the roads work better with the software. So I guess later on you mentioned that consumer sentiment does matter and that people need to trust it. So I just feel like those are two different thought processes of actually just looking at numbers, which I don't think.
Yeah, I can tie it together. Safety critical data, numbers matter for legal regulatory approval, but for adoption, people need to trust it and emotions coming. Okay, Uziobi?
My problem with the data is that we don't have an authoritative source unless Tesla says something. And I find the FSD tracker to be a biased sample set. And so, pivoting from that, I also think what Nick was saying is correct with the mere exposure effect is very important. Getting an Uber like I did, I've learned so much from this space, and actually talking to the Uber driver and seeing his experience with it. It's a different world when you're actually in the car. But my problem is really with what's the authoritative source of data that we're going to use for these conversations? Because when we had the conversation with Dan O'Dowd, he just regresses into anecdotal evidence, which is not how we approach these conversations.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that people are calling Tesla FSD tracker not good enough, and yet liking and reposting polls that are clearly bias sample to a millionth degree. Okay, and these are the same people. Uziobi?
Yeah, that's not me reposting that, and I also would add, who I missed the conversation with the person who runs it, so I'm missing some context. But if you're just
Elias has done incredible job with the limited data that he has. It's not perfect, but it's moving in the right direction. And the more people submit data to it, the better it'll be. It's never going to be perfect, like you said. Like you said, until Tesla says it, that's all we got. But in my mind, it's getting to a point where it's actually pretty good enough. I mean, even Machine, who is a data scientist, you have to mute yourself when you're not talking. Even Machine, who's a data scientist, not a great one, but he's a data scientist, I guess, quotes it a lot. So he's using it. He's been using it. And Elias is extreme working really hard to make that thing better. And I think he's doing a great job. Pennington.
Yeah, people are always more critical of other people's driving skills than they are themselves. So it does make sense that people are more critical of FSD than they would if they were operating the car themselves. But the only thing that we ever hear from the company is from the CEO who says you need to try FSD. It's mind blowing. So I guess my question to the people on this board who speak to a lot more people than I do is, from who you've been hearing who's tried the software, have you been generally hearing that their experience has been mind blowing, or something better or something worse? Kind of what's your sense so far of the users?
Henning.
I wanted to say something else. Maybe others can comment first on this topic.
Okay. I think Sawyer is probably the best one to comment on it. Sawyer, what's your kind of feeling of, and I'm sure people are DMing you about their free FSD trials. Are they signing up for subscriptions?
Yeah, I would say a lot of people. I mean, I ran a poll, albeit a very biased one. 30,000 people voted, and 44%, if you take away the C results, which was like 60% of the votes, 44% chose to subscribe after their free trial ended. I have spoken to a lot of people that are sort of outside the Tesla bubble that have tried it, and one, they're really impressed, and a few of them have signed up for the subscription. But I also have like my mother who bought FSD a couple years ago with her Model Y. She never used FSD because she was too scared of it. It wasn't good enough. But FSD 12 changed that. It's now good enough for where she uses it all the time and she feels comfortable doing that. And she's in her mid 70s. And same with another friend, Amy. She has a Model Y. She bought it 2 years ago, never used FSD, too scared. Now she uses it all the time. She texts me about it. So the 2% number that came out, and like that seemed laughably low to me. There was no way it was that low. I certainly didn't think it was the 44% that I got in my poll, but maybe somewhere closer to like 10 to 20% is more realistic, but certainly not 2%.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we did in here too. We said that 2% number has assumptions in there that are not valid going forward. We said that number will rise as people finish the FSD trials. We said some people won't sign up right away after the trial finishes. Maybe they'll wait a few weeks, maybe a couple months to miss it. Right.
I've gotten more DMs from
But
people
I would
taking
be
advantage.
shocked. I would be shocked if it was as high as 20%. I agree with Omar. It's probably more like 5 to 10%. You were saying you had DMs?
Yeah, I was just saying I've gotten way more DMs from people taking advantage of the new Model Y 0.99% loan rate than I have from people who've signed up for the FSD subscription.
Yeah. What's it like? Do you kind of like how do you translate DMs, which is obviously anecdotal, right? And a lot of those are probably anonymous accounts. How do you go from that to kind of make you form an opinion or make an assumption about kind of for your forecasts?
I mean, it's really hard because I'm really only getting biased data and mostly just data from really biased Tesla fans, right? There are some exceptions to that. So I usually just like, let's say I get like a number, like I got 44% in my poll. I usually at least like just chop it in half because I feel like that's probably more realistic. But it's impossible, honestly. It's really hard.
That's a machine anyway.
I think with removing the neck, we're getting closer to a moment where I call it the why I don't have that moment. You need to have someone next to you sitting in your car and wondering, why am I still driving? Why I don't have that? And I think we're getting nearer to this kind of tipping point, specifically when removing the neck. And let's see what happens. I think that this will create a lot of positive sentiment.
I like Teslas.
Hi guys, I have a question for you. How should Tesla communicate this part? Because there's a difference between using FSD because it's fun and interesting, and the other side, which is the most important part, it's because it makes you safer. It makes you a safer driver, and it makes other people around you safer. And I think Tesla's not communicating that part, because if you tell a family member, hey, make sure to put FSD on, you're putting a seatbelt on your next drive because you're going to be safer, like the probability of you being in an accident much less. I'm sure a lot of people would subscribe to supervised FSD if that was very clear. I don't know what you think.
Okay. Omar, what do you think?
Or Jack?
I'll respond real quick. I think the last time, I think what Tesla needs to do is to share the data. Like if FSD is really getting better, and if it really is safer than human driving, share that data and continue to update it as things just continue to improve. I think the last time we got like disengagement per whatever million miles or whatever data was back in like early 2023, I think, like on Investor Day, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, you get in a Tesla and start driving it, pretty soon it's going to start saving you from a crash. You're going to get a forward collision warning. It has, for example, cross traffic AAB, things like that. So you can really see right away. And with 12, I mean, the driving is so smooth and comfortable now. It definitely makes you feel a lot safer, I think, for a lot of people, as long as you're comfortable with the idea of having to intervene. So, yeah, I agree that they should probably be talking about this more. But I mean, you just experience the product and it's right there. You won't be driving it for long before those beeps catch your attention, or lane departure avoidance saves you from hitting somebody. But a lot of people just don't know about this. When they think about Tesla, safety is not one of the top words that comes to mind. When the reality is, nobody else has cross traffic AEB. They have automatic emergency braking for a car that's right in front of you, but they don't for a car that's crossing in front of you because it's difficult to predict if it's going to stop or go or whatever. So now they're starting to mandate automatic emergency braking. I think a lot of people don't realize that because of the billions of dollars Tesla's invested in FSD, they have AEB that nobody else can match.
Yeah, great points. Great points. And just as a note on free speech, we have bulls, bears in this space, and even people who block me come to the speaker board and get to speak to others and ask questions, get there. I mean, Henning right now is blocking me, and yet he's on my speaker board, and I'm asking every single question he asks. So if you had any doubts about whether people are allowed to have their opinions in the space, there's your proof. Finflexity.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone saw this, but today morning, WSJ released its news report and stated that uh, Robin Denholm, the board chair, will be traveling across the world trying to rally investors to vote for Elon's pay package. I have linked it in the replies just right now. Yeah, I just put there for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see what you posted. Tesla board chair Robin Denholm and others at the company plan to spend the next several weeks crisscrossing the globe to rally support from shareholders, according to a Wall Street Journal article. Okay.
Yeah,
Hey,
Tesla's
actually,
clearly going all
yeah,
out to get investor support. I mean, they're even running ads. Like I don't think they've ever done that.
yeah. So I saw a post earlier from you that kind of showed what each institutional investor had voted in a 2018 compensation vote, the original vote. That came from the Wall Street Journal article, right? Today's Wall Street Journal article on the topic.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah,
I must
yeah.
have worded it wrongly because a lot of people thought that's how they're going to vote this upcoming vote. So I put
Well,
a clarification.
thank you. Here's the other thing too. So a lot of these institutional investors, they have to go by. I mean, they don't necessarily have to go by, I guess, but Institutional Shareholder Services (ISS), which Elon likes to call ISIS, and Glass Lewis. Those are the two proxy voting kind of consulting services, and they analyze these proposals, and they say you should vote like this and that. So I guess if an institutional investor wants to CYA, cover their asses, they go with that. My understanding is that they go with that.
Yep. One interesting thing is
But this,
that
especially the passive investors. So that would be Vanguard, BlackRock, certain BlackRock funds, and State Street. But today, Elon followed a BlackRock CIO. So I wonder if that means he had a conversation with BlackRock and maybe got sports. Like that could be an indication, in my mind at least.
yeah,
And
maybe.
and then the other thing I want to say is ISS and Glass Lewis have not yet announced what they recommend others to do with this vote. So that's yet to come. So be ready for that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, Bloomberg also put out their own report today, and they were saying institutional investors hold roughly 46% of all Tesla shares now, which is down from 70% when the first vote was held back in 2018 for Elon's compensation package. And I'm pretty sure there was a report a couple weeks ago that retail shareholders make up roughly 35% of the base right now, and that's excluding Elon, of course, and Kimball and all those other execs. So the retail shareholder base is much, much larger than it was in 2018. However, historically, retail shareholders don't really participate in these things, which is why I think Tesla's really going out of its way to garner as much retail support as possible with these ads and putting up this is the first time they've made a whole website just for voting. So they're really going all out.
Yeah, much like the general election, this is really about turnout. Who actually shows up to vote?
Inflexity and then Pennington.
Yeah, so to just cover what Yaman was saying, the Tesla board chair of 2018, she's from Australian, I think, and she is reported to have been to New York to, talk to the advisors that are going to give out institutions what they should vote for, against, or for. So she's out there talking to the advisors rather than the institutions itself.
Pennington.
Do you think the board is giving these investors the answers that we all want to know about what this actual vote means relative to Elon staying or leaving, what the path is, if any, to get in the 25%, to better inform their vote? Or do you think they're just sort of communicating to them similarly to how they're communicating to retail?
I mean, anything I have to say on that is going to be speculation, but I wouldn't be surprised if much of what they say to institutional investors is what's on the website they created for this purpose. Sawyer?
Yeah, I agree with that. What's interesting is obviously Judge McCormick thought we all made an uninformed vote back in 2018 because the board didn't make enough disclosures and stuff. But what's funny is 70% of the voting base back then was institutional. So they're basically just claiming institutionals were clueless about their votes too.
It'll be great once this is over.
Yeah. Does anyone on the board think that it's not going to be a close call?
I think it will be. I think the shareholder base that existed in 2018 does not exist today. And you have a lot of butthurt shareholders that have come in the last year, since 2020, 2021, that are down on their stock, or they're just not happy with Elon's management style the last couple of years. And they're voting based off of those emotions, not whether it is fair or not what the judge did, and whether they should vote to reinstate the package based on what Elon delivered in terms of completing the milestones and performance awards.
Yeah, but on the other hand, those guys got margin call. Now they only have 3 shares left. The guy who has 1 million shares is probably going to vote yes.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think objectively, you just increase the risk that Elon could potentially leave if this thing gets voted down. And that would impact Tesla's value, in my opinion. That's just my opinion.
I bet it's going to pass.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a close call, but I think it'll pass too. I agree with Omar and Sawyer. Half hour to the end. We're going to keep these to 2 hours, following which I plan to do Patreon-only live streams for value patrons and above. The information about that is at the top of our screens. Pennington, then Yoda.
Yeah, I heard terms like be a butthurt and margin called. But the one thing that Sawyer said that's accurate is I wasn't a shareholder in 2018. I was a shareholder in 2021. So my experience as an investor is very different. So my perspective when it came to this vote is very different. But the reason sometimes to inform a vote for somebody like myself is not because necessarily the stock is down. It's because the guy who is the CEO, at least in my opinion, decided to pursue his own interests at the expense of the company, and that's a very difficult thing for somebody like myself to reconcile. Now, it's fine to pursue your own interests, but when you know that's going to conflict with the interests of your stakeholders, that's something entirely different. So perspective matters, and obviously time frame matters as well. But I don't think this is going to be simple.
Yeah, I think what makes this like partly what makes this vote so complicated is that you do have a ton of those shareholders that came in like 2020, 2021 after Elon had completed a lot of the milestones, and they didn't get to reap the benefits or the rewards of that compensation package, along with a lot of other shareholders that came in earlier. So really, you're asking them to approve a compensation package that they didn't even get the rewards from. But this is why it's so complicated. You really, at that point, you just have to look at like what's fair and what's not fair.
Omar.
Look, I mean, this is a vote about the 2018 compensation package. This is the pay package that he received in 2018. He had no guaranteed pay. It was based on those milestones being achieved. There are a lot of people who want to make you think that this is a referendum on how Elon is doing today. They want to make you think the question is, do you like Elon? And oh, well, no, I don't like Elon. He bought X, so let me vote no. The question actually says, do you want a big kick in the balls? Yes or no? That's what the question says. Okay. So if you vote no, you're really only screwing yourself. To go back and say, well, I don't like what Elon's been doing recently, so we're going to go back retroactively and invalidate his compensation package. I understand why it makes sense to a lot of people. It's natural. But there are really a lot of people misleading you into doing something that is not going to be beneficial for your shares. It's going to be a big kick in the balls to your shareholdings if they vote no. So, I mean, just immediately, right, you've got this case. The lawyers are asking for billions of dollars for winning this case. If there's even a chance, right, this is a non binding vote. If there's even a chance we shareholders can say, no, we're good with the plan, then we don't have to pay them. I mean, they're not going to get billions, but hundreds of millions, maybe, right? You can save the company that money just by saying, no, we don't actually think we should invalidate his comp plan. And, finally, he's probably going to have to be compensated one way or the other. You're not going to really save anything. You may actually cause more dilution if he has to be given a new grant at, today's equity prices, for example. And either that, or if he doesn't have 20%, 5%, he says he doesn't feel comfortable growing the company to be an AI and robotics giant, right? So you're not really saving yourself anything ultimately. You're probably costing the company hundreds of millions, if not billions, by voting no. And it's really going back to 2018 and taking away the deal that was made then because you don't like what he did in 2023 or 2022 or 2024. So I hope that people make the right decision. They think about this. This is a very important decision shareholders are being asked to make. We know that there's a lot of people who feel emotionally and are going to vote no. So if you're on the fence, vote yes. Every vote can make a difference.
Devin.
I do want to just say I do agree with Omar there about the compensation. It seems ridiculous that they would go back and take away something
Devin,
like.
first time speakers are required to ask questions.
Yeah, I'm going to. Thanks. So my question would be: does it rub anyone the wrong way that they would aggressively advertise the shareholder votes and things like this hard with the sales, slumping the way that they are? Thanks.
No, because that ad says, don't kick Omar in the balls. And I love that ad. They're also advertising their products, contrary to what you have people think. Go to the Google Ad Transparency tool. You can search for everyone who's advertising. You can search for Tesla. You can see that they have thousands of different ads running on Google, running on X, running on Facebook. They're spending a tiny amount of money to make shareholders vote and have their voices represented. They can vote no if they want, but at least make sure we have everyone's vote tallied. Make sure that we don't make a decision that does not actually reflect what the shareholders want. So, there's just people who are just trying to get you upset about everything that happens. People like Fred, people like, Dan O'Dowd, who just try and dramatize everything as much as possible. For a vote like this, they need to make sure that shareholders vote. It could make a huge difference to the future of the company.
Hanging, Dan Pennington. Okay. You guys hear Henning?
No.
All right, connection issues. Pennington?
I just remember back in 2022 after Elon started buying up the Twitter shares, and I thought about whether or not to hold or sell, and I decided to hold because I said, you know what, even if, what does one have to do with the other? But clearly, hindsight's 2020, it affected Tesla. So the benefit of hindsight, to Sawyer and to Omar and Yaman, do you think that the board properly handled this whole process back then with Twitter and the communications and everything that followed?
Yeah, I think it was great overall, although some people have gotten upset about it. You look at, again, the Grok 1.5 vision paper they've put out. I think that these language capabilities are really going to be critical in solving self-driving. So I think it ended up being pretty crucial. It really elevated his influence, his position in the world. It only really made him more powerful and Tesla by extension. So I think in time, history is going to realize that this was actually probably something that was really helpful. And most people don't feel that way right now. They just feel it was horrible. But just wait. I mean, this company is just doing incredible things. People doubted Elon for years that this pure vision system for self driving could make any sense. After years and years of work, they've actually proven that it can. And I mean, he had incredible foresight long before AI was a buzzword. He was investing in this. He is the leader that we need. As much as people love to hate him, scrutinize his every decision, we need this guy leading the company right now. That's not about liking him or disliking him. It's just if you want to see the full potential of FSD and Optimus, he's the guy who's going to make it happen. He's the guy who came up with these things. If it weren't for him, they'd have a CEO who's making really nice cars, and that's about it.
One thing I think personally, I think the board could have done better back in 2022 during Elon's acquisition of Twitter. I think they could have pushed Elon to source cash, more cash from alternatives rather than Tesla stock. I think he had quite a bit of SpaceX stock back then, and obviously most of it just came from, I think like $1 billion of it came from him selling SpaceX stock or borrowing whatever debt from that. But most of it was him just selling Tesla stock. So I think they could have pushed him to say, why don't you just like sell a little less Tesla and maybe do a little bit more SpaceX? Because now we're in a situation where Elon owns overall much less Tesla than he used to. And because of that, he now feels uncomfortable unless he gets to 25% ownership. He feels uncomfortable developing, AI related products under Tesla. And that's why this vote is so important. The irony in all this is that Elon would have been much closer, if not over 25%, if he had never bought Twitter, right? So it's kind of like a shitty situation, but it is what it is. I benefited from Elon buying Twitter. I think we're all better off long term with Elon buying Twitter. Humanity is probably better, but it certainly was a shitty situation to some regard.
Yoda.
Yeah, Grok's ability to understand and process natural language is going to make the voice commands in the Tesla cars and the way we talk to the Optimus bot much more intuitive and efficient. This training data is invaluable. So rather than us trying to play with buttons on our phones, touch screens, drivers and riders are going to basically tell the cars what they want to do. Stop by Starbucks, go a little faster, take this turn, ask questions, learn things, get entertained, all that, because of the data that's available to Grok right now that can be used to train. And I think Grok's understanding of the real world can also improve FSD, obviously, to make things more aware of the environment, what's happening, and make it safer and more reliable. So I think, yeah, it's going to pay dividends in the long run.
Machine.
Just in compensation, I also sold a bunch of Tesla shares in 2021. And there were some people who told me they would buy me some shares, and they've disappeared. But I kind of want more shares now. So I was wondering if your audience could donate me shares. Someone else said they would get me shares, and then they pulled out. But can you, please?
Okay. Omar.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people point to this as a big betrayal. They really cite this as one of the number one reasons they're voting no, because he sold his Tesla shares. But, he did obviously try and back out of the deal when he realized the full implications. They sued him and they forced him to go through with the deal. So he kind of just had to buy it. And, he's expressed regret before about having to sell Tesla shares. But at the same time, I mean, we have to realize when we're giving stock based compensation to employees, it's so they can eventually sell it. I mean, Judge McCormick in her compensation case said that Elon wanted this compensation package so that he could eventually use the funds to start a city on Mars. And, that may be kind of ridiculous, or it may not be so ridiculous if you look at what SpaceX is doing. But if that's the case, then he will eventually sell these shares too and use the funds to, put into SpaceX or whatever. So the compensation package is a provision that he can't sell the shares for 5 years once the options have been exercised. And the options haven't been exercised yet. So we're looking at something that's, 2030 or beyond probably. But I think if we don't want someone to sell their shares, then we just shouldn't give them stock based comp. We should compensate them in cash. If we're giving them shares, the point is they're going to sell them eventually.
Ending. That was Yobi.
I have two questions. Maybe someone knows here. So one is, if a vote fails, can he get a kind of an updated package on the new terms? Maybe this will prevent him from leaving. That's question one. And the second question is, do you know any, let's say, valid reason an institutional would vote today against it? Because we all know what will happen, right? I mean, they are tanking their own stock and investment.
Yeah, and the first thing, yeah, I mean, technically, yes, it is possible they could form a different package. I think it'd be very difficult, though. Um, let's just assume that they're going to press forward with appeal anyways. We'd have to wait and see how that goes. If they win the appeal, then they could just formulate a similar package as it did in 2018 if it weren't to pass this time. But if it were to pass and then they lose the appeal, I don't know. It gets real complicated.
Yeah, it's difficult to know what institutions are going to vote. If you look at the original vote, when he was essentially being guaranteed nothing, the institutions, many of them still voted no. So, I mean, one would think just on a purely sort of dollars and cents basis, now they already know that this is fully vested, that it's going to be $59 billion. You might think that they would actually have an even greater percentage voting no this time. And as Sawyer pointed out, they're less of a percentage of the total base, but still. But then on the other hand, perhaps the institutions recognize the importance of Elon, more than the average emotional retail shareholder, and perhaps they'd vote yes this time. Perhaps the proxy advisory firms are going to come out and say yes, which honestly would surprise me. I would expect them to come out and say no, but hope I'm surprised on that. So, it's kind of unclear to me how institutions are actually going to vote. Um, and I guess we'll just have to see next month.
15-minute warning. Machine, Yoda, then Sawyer.
I think it comes down a lot to how these institutional investors think about FSD and Optimus and how bullish they are. Because if they're not, if you look at where the stock is, its valuation, it's pretty, nicely priced. And these investors might be looking at and saying, why would I decide to dilute our shares by 10% to just give it to Elon Musk? We're not diluting it to raise capital. We're just diluting it to give it to him. And what's our benefit? What are we going to get out of it now moving forward? So if you believe in FSD, then certainly you would say, I don't want, him to move away from the company because that hurts the, prospectus for FSD. But if you don't believe in that, then it doesn't seem like there's much downside.
Yoda.
Question for Sawyer. Can an institutional investor cast their vote and then sell their shares, or is their voted share only valid if they hold the stock still at the date?
So as far as I know, you can, as long as you held shares on April 15th, even if you sold all your shares on April 16th, you still vote as if you had all those shares. So I don't know if it works the same way with institutionals. That's at least the way it works with retail. I assume it works the same way. But yes, technically, I think so.
So did you have another point to make?
Oh yeah, sorry. I think one thing that most people can agree on is that there is some percentage of Tesla stock being attached to the fact that Elon is CEO and he's the one driving decisions. I have to imagine institutionals recognize that. And if they were to continue just to hold Tesla stock and they were to vote no, that the value of their stock would go down to some degree. So what that degree is, I have no clue. But I think we can all agree that if Elon were to leave for some reason, Tesla stock would go down to some degree. At least short term. I don't know about long term.
Yeah. So I think it's it seems to me that everyone on the board thinks it's about 50-50, maybe 60-40, that the vote will pass. It's going to be a close call, it seems. And just from the actions of Tesla with all these ad buys and the website creation and going around the world meeting with institutional investors, etc., they believe it's going to be close to, apparently. If it doesn't pass, Sawyer, or let me ask Omar first. If it doesn't pass, what do you think is the likelihood that Elon would stay?
80%.
Sawyer?
I sort of sway on this because Elon is so unpredictable, which is why I think it makes it tough to predict how he'll react to a potential no vote. I don't think it's as high as 80%, but I'd be lying if I said it was a guarantee he'd leave too. So I honestly don't know. I just pure speculation. I don't think it's worth me adding my own speculation.
Machine?
I would say 40% chance he leaves, but the stock is definitely going to tank short term if the vote does not pass.
Okay. Pennington. 10-minute warning. Pennington, go ahead. Okay. Yoda.
So, Machine, if that's the case, wouldn't that potential downward pressure be factored into today's price, or do you guys think that's already factored in?
I mean, they're probably factored in to some degree, but I think nobody knows like what's going to happen. So we're all just like on our toes.
Yeah, and obviously the worst thing that stock markets hate is uncertainty. Yeah, I agree with Sawyer that it is probably worked baked in to some extent, but I mean, if I asked people a month ago, do you think this is going to be close? No one thought it would be close.
As you said, Yaman, like markets hate uncertainty, and Elon is the definition of unpredictability and uncertainty. So,
okay, we're going to take Machine, and then we're going to take 3 questions, and then that's it. Machine.
Do any of you know how the votes are counted if someone abstains or doesn't vote? I'm reading somewhere that there's a difference between some of the different articles on how they count.
I'm not sure. Anyone?
Abstain is the same thing as not voting, but abstain allows you to vote on certain issues but not vote on other issues.
Danny, what's your question?
Yeah. Some people think that the stock will crash if Elon leaves short term. But what do you think long term, given Elon's reach? For example, just on Twitter, hundreds of millions of followers. Don't you think long term this could be negative to not have him?
Yeah, I think most people in this space probably agree with that statement. Not having Elon would be negative for the long term.
yeah, I agree.
Pennington.
But just as a sort of an opposing view, couldn't you see a world where if he were to leave, people actually would be more willing to buy the car? The demand for Tesla cars could actually increase, and some of the global government issues that Tesla's had of late, whether it's through journalists or through actually the governments themselves, could actually subside.
The flip side of that, though, is that I think Tesla's AI projects would take a massive hit, both the bot and full self-driving. And I think a lot of the reason that people have joined Tesla is because of Elon, his vision. And if he leaves, I do think there would be some sort of exodus in terms of talent going elsewhere in the AI
Machine
front.
than AR.
Totally agree. Look at what just happened with people going to Kyle Voigt. You don't think they would go to an Elon Musk bot startup? People would flood out.
AR.
Hi, everyone. Just doesn't everyone think that this fear mongering is just kind of overblown? I mean, every single thing seems like it's being pushed by short sellers. The Vanguard thing, I mean, how they voted in 2018.
Vanguard is not short sellers.
No, I know they're not.
The short seller percentage in Tesla today is about 2-3%, I think. It's still very low. This is not a 2019 story.
I debated a few weeks ago when I put out my post whether I should make as big of a deal out of this vote as I did. And I came to the conclusion that I think this is the most important Tesla shareholder vote, certainly since I've been a shareholder the last 6-7 years. But I think ever. So I think we should scare people into, voting and getting as much shareholder support as possible, because traditionally retail shareholders don't vote in these things. And if, me, Omar, and others saying something encourages them to vote, then I think it was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to make people shit their pants.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the biggest retail participation in any vote in stock market history. All right. On that note, we're going to end the space. I'm going to start a Patreon-only live stream only for value patrons and above. Only for value patrons and above. It's going to be a small space. I'm going to answer every single question. It's going to go on for about however long it goes. And that's going to be the norm from now on. 1 to 2 hours for this, and then 1 hour after that. Thank you very much, everybody, and talk to you tomorrow.